Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is Tuesday, January 7th, 2025 at 4:34 p.m. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
one quick change. We're going to add an executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74206-1B at the end of our workshop meeting. And with that one modification, I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a motion, a second, to adopt the agenda as amended with an executive session. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted as amended. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
if we approve the consent agenda as presented for the mayor to sign, the clerk to attest.
Second.
Have a motion, a second, to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will move on to item 26, which is resolution number 24-2493. I don't know if Director TV, who's also working, is, or Mr. Neri. I do think that we are without our HR director today.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so what you have on the agenda was the AI policy that we had brought forth last month, I think, and Dave was here to answer questions. We did have a meeting with Councilmember Strader a couple weeks ago, or last week. Had some clarifications that we've added, and I have supplemented those as part of the policy. So it really is just, I think, for your discussion and questions for Dave.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
Yeah, we had a nice meeting and I really want to express my gratitude for being able to review the procedures along with the policy. And I feel like those small changes were very helpful, I think, to further clarify so that we are encouraging our employees to use generative AI in a safe manner that's responsible. And I feel much better about the policy now as it's drafted. And yeah, that's kind of just a quick summary of that meeting. So thanks for pulling it off. I apologize for the delay, but I do think that it was helpful for us to move it forward.
Thank you for the conversation.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. For the record, Councilman Whitlock has joined us at 4:37 as he's logging into the system. He is here in the room and present should he wish to participate in this upcoming vote. Councilor, are there other questions, comments, or do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strader.
I move that we approve resolution number 24-2493.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 24-2493. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is agreed to. Thank you
Great
very
job,
much.
Dave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next time on the agenda is item 27, which is the Meridian Intersection and Pedestrian Safety MIPS report, project updates, and we'll turn this over to Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I'm here to provide an update on the effort that's been taking place between staff at the city and ACHD in reviewing the MIPS report and the project list. As you recall, back in September, council approved a funding request of $500,000 as part of the fiscal year 25 budget to support this implementation of projects listed in the MIPS report. So after that budget was adopted, a selection team worked through the list of projects and we identified 8 projects focusing on areas near schools for ACHD to consider scoping. We've been identifying which projects might be scheduled for annual maintenance, which projects are already in progress or are planned for construction. So after that coordination with ACHD, looking at both the MIPS list and just the 8 projects that the selection team identified, we realized that 8 projects are already in progress. And I can go over those if you're interested. But really, it was great to see that a lot of the projects we had already identified are already in the works. So we were to kind of put those aside and focus our efforts on other projects, maybe to pursue scoping. So out of the projects that weren't already going to be worked on or scheduled for implementation, one of those came to the forefront, and that is a pedestrian crossing on Locust Grove near Woodbridge. This was a pedestrian crossing that was programmed in the fiscal year 2024 through 2028 integrated five-year work plan. And design was originally scheduled for 2026-27. But as you recall, in this last cycle, this last year, it was one of the many projects that was deferred. And so it is no longer scheduled in the integrated five-year work plan. So working with ACHD staff, they felt this was a good project and a way to kind of move it to the forefront. So I have Matt Deegan here with ACHD, and I've been working closely with his team. I'm going to have him maybe speak to the design concept specifics or answer any questions. And I can pull up a concept map that shows the Z-type crossing. And before I have him go, I just wanted to provide an update as what we've discussed. We're in the really initial stages of these conversations. We haven't set a location. We don't have a full design or anything. It's really circling back with all of you to just let you know the progress. But from our discussions, we're thinking that ACHD would kind of prepare the plan specs and provide a cost estimate and do the procurement and work with that contractor. And our role as the city would be to fund the construction through some sort of cost share agreement. Current estimates, I think we last talked were maybe around 300,000 for a dual stage pedestrian crossing with a center island median. So those are some of the things that we have to work with. But I'll turn it over to Matt and share my screen so you can see the concept that he's prepared.
Mr. Mayor, council members, for the record, Matt Deegan, Safety Engineering Manager at the Ada County Highway District. I don't know if you see the exhibit. I'm still seeing all your faces on the Teams meeting right here. But basically, we're looking at a two-stage PHP crossing. I think the best example would be the one that we installed a couple of years ago right at the Meridian Library on Cherry Lane. It's to where when a pedestrian calls, they have a protected crossing to the median. They hit the pedestrian call again, which then stops the traffic for a second cycle. Oh, I apologize. Should I repeat that? Or, oh, okay. Really, so the two-stage crossing is kind of what ACHD, what we've been doing on all of our 5-lane arterials now for a couple of years. We have done like an unprotected single-phase crossing and then a protected single-phase, but what we're going with mostly now on all the 5-lane arterial crossings is a two-stage PHP crossing. I guess with that, if stand for any questions that you have on the proposed location or questions about the PHP itself.
Council, any questions? Matt? Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I do have a question for you, Heather, the MIPS really kind of focus on intersection. To my knowledge, we never really looked at this area as an intersection through the process. I'm curious how or why is this project rising up compared to anything else that may have been more directly around an intersection project? And then maybe secondarily, why this 5-lane crossing versus any other 5-lane mid-mile crossing in Meridian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a great question. I think I can't speak to why it was placed on the list because I wasn't part of those conversations, but I do know as part of the selection team and us reviewing the list of projects, we were really focusing on areas near schools that provide access and understanding other pedestrian connectivity. And that was something that we also kind of looked at, knowing that there's future locations and development potential on the west side of Locust Grove and understanding the 5-mile pathway potentially. There's some proposed pathways. So I understand it's not an intersection per se. And I have to maybe look into that a little bit more to see like the rationale for why it was initially placed on the MIPS list. But there were, 7 other projects where like, these are near schools, let's focus on these. And ACHD was like, we're going to do this through a maintenance order, or we're already in progress for doing some work near some of the other crossings.
Mr. Hood, you may be a casual observer, but since you were, I don't know if you had anything specific that you wanted to add to get a little bit more perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a lot, although I was part, unlike Heather, was part of the original project report, the MIPS study. Maybe just a little bit of context. I know she said Woodbridge and Locust Grove. This is an intersection. Typically, these three-stage crossings don't go right in the throat of an intersection, right? You offset it so you can still make your turning movements for vehicles. There is a school there, and it's not Rebound. I'm trying to think of the name of that school that is just off of Water Tower there on the north side of the road, just west of Locust Grove Road. And I know the neighborhood connectivity, right, between from the east side to the west side across Locust Grove was certainly a consideration when we looked at the need for pedestrian-like improvements near intersections and schools. So like Heather said, I'd have to read back the summary of when we evaluated this with police and the school district and others to fully remember why this one kind of rose towards the top. I'm not going to say it was a top project, but after, working with ACHD, like Heather said, they're in the works to do our top projects, and this was the next tier of projects to do. I will just say, taking the school side out of that, and even the pathways, there is a need for some additional connectivity between the residential uses there on the east side of Locust Grove and Story Park, and some of the businesses and dog parks and other things that are just on the other side of this roadway. I've witnessed, and this isn't why it's on the list, but it is quite a long ways to go down to Franklin to cross, or up to Central to cross from the Woodbridge neighborhood. So, and there's quite a few residences that are there. And so a mid-block crossing there really just made some sense for multiple reasons, even though there is a school there and some other services that really was the focus of MIPS originally. There's some other factors why this one, again, seemed like a good candidate.
Yeah, and I'm not questioning whether or not it's a valid project. I'm curious how it made it into the MIPS evaluation criteria to be considered a project as compared to improvements around an intersection in that context. I don't want council to feel like we aren't addressing what the MIPS was about compared to just doing a important connectivity. I mean, I drive by this every single day. I 100% agree. There's a little bit of a hill. There's not necessarily aligned roadways. It's a challenging place to walk across. I just want to make sure we're staying focused on the intent of the MIPS money from council's perspective, that we're not just, why not just go do another school location that needs a signal to make it easier for people to get across it as well compared to this one. So that's all. Just want to make sure that was on the record for all council to hear. I didn't choose this project. I question whether or not it's meeting the intent of MIPS projects, but I'll let council have further feedback.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Heather, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm so sorry. You touched on, right, that there were these other projects that were outlined, but are already going to essentially be addressed through one means or another. Are those projects going to be resolved in the next year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? And the reason why I ask is I know sometimes, right, there's a project that's programmed out, things happen, it falls off or gets delayed. But when the city typically comes in with funding for this, it either ensures that it happens or often accelerates it. So can you give us a flavor for those other projects and maybe some of the dates that they are set to be constructed?
Yeah, and so first, Councilman Cavanagh, would you like me to kind of give an update? I didn't provide an estimate on if we were to move forward with this project, when the timeline for this one would be, because I think part of that was fiscal year 25 construction. For the 7 or 8 other projects I alluded to that are in progress, part of those, there needs to be some further coordination. Some of it was they ran out of paint and they need to procure more for some of the markings as part of maintenance. That was, I think, for 3 or 4 of the projects. So when we last did this coordination, it was in November. So I think for those, I can always come back with an update on the dates when I get those from ACHD. I just hadn't been provided like definite dates yet on some of those other ones.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strader.
I think it might help us to move a project forward if we could just refresh on the entire MIPS plan and see sort of similar to how, we have our transportation commission look at the 5-year work plan and we kind of go through every year and prioritize. Maybe it would help everyone to have the context of here were all the projects, here's where this project was, and then we could just kind of get a snapshot of where that was at, and that would help us contextualize the request. It's just a suggestion, but I think that might be a good way to move it forward. It's been a while since I've reviewed that plan, so.
I would agree, and I'd also think if the number's 300,000 was the intention for the other 200,000 in this next, what other projects are lining up? And I think that would be relevant as well, just for a full context of what would be considered this year. So if that works, we can bring that back, maybe in a fuller presentation. Try to shoot for the next couple of weeks. I don't want to delay, especially if we're getting into the time frame where people need to start thinking about construction if they're trying to do it this upcoming year. But I'll let you all determine how quickly you can bring back kind of that update report of those other projects, those other ones that are, on the list and being contemplated or not being contemplated. I get it. Some of the projects were millions of dollars, on Eagle Road. We're not doing that project, right? We're not putting a pedestrian overpass over the flying ramps onto Eagle Road, even though that may be near top of the list. There's not money for that at this point in time, so.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think that's certainly doable. I think what Heather and I can get together here and we'll probably email you. She's keeping track through an updated spreadsheet of all the projects are identified through MIPS. I will just reiterate, and maybe it was said, but this was one of the intersections. It is an intersection. It's not a four-way intersection. It's not an arterial intersection, but it is an intersection that's near a school that was evaluated for some of these concerns that had near misses. I don't know that there was a real crash history there. That's why we'd have to go back through the notes and look. But it was one of the ones that met the criteria to evaluate, and there were hundreds of intersections that we looked at for MIPS. So it was a pretty comprehensive evaluation of intersections. But I think we can give you the updated spreadsheet just so you can, to refresh what are all the projects. And even, I think Heather's pretty current with the status update of those projects too, where it's at in design at ACHD or construction. Yes, with a somewhat of caveat that year to year budget constraints can occur and some things may get pushed or even accelerated, but and come back in the next few weeks or whatever. But I think that's doable. We'll probably give you that to chew on in the interim rather than trying to go through the whole report with you again and give it to you as a refresher.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Okay, with that, we had an executive session. So council, do I have a motion?
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-206-1B.
Second.
I have a motion second to go into executive session. Is there a discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries, and we'll go into executive session. Council, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we come out of executive session?
Second.
Have a motion second to come out of executive session. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are out of executive session. Do I have another motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we adjourn our workshop.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is January 7th, 2025 at 6 p.m. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item up is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll turn this over to Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks,
Quick
Mr. Mayor.
introduction.
Just a quick moment. I know we're got some good muscle memory to stand up for the pledge, but earlier today I had the chance to meet with James Vanderveen. James is a freshman at the Gem Prep Virtual Academy. He's also in the Scouts. I believe he's in the same troop as Councilmember Strader's son, so that's a nice coincidence. James has generously offered to lead us in the pledge. So James, we'll invite you up and give you an opportunity to help lead us in the pledge this evening.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. James, thanks. You're welcome anytime to lead us in the pledge. That's about the best lead we've had in a long time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh. Next up will be our community invocation, which tonight will be delivered by Pastor Doug Conley, who the most recent groundbreaking ceremony held in the city for a future eighth community member. Just trying not to say Stone Hills New Church, but congratulations on that. Thank you for being here. For those in the audience, please join us in the community invocation or take this as a moment of silence and reflection.
Lord God, we're so grateful to just be here tonight, and we come to you just thankful and with a thankful heart, and so many things to be grateful for, Lord. Grateful for life. We're grateful to have an opportunity to have a relationship with you. We're grateful for family, for friends, for neighbors, and we are also grateful for this amazing city, Lord. And I pray for all of the leaders of our city, whether they're here tonight or at other places. We pray for the leaders that are here tonight. We pray for our mayor. I ask that you would give him guidance and wisdom as he leads our city, and along with the city council and Lord, these men and the women that are here and making decisions. I just pray that you would be with them, Lord. We lift up our first responders, and Lord, just as they serve our city and they put their life sometimes on the line so that we can be safe and protected, and we just appreciate that and grateful for that. And so I ask for tonight that you would just give these men and women, Lord, guidance and wisdom as they make decisions, Lord. And Lord, these decisions, Lord, shape many people's lives and livelihood. And so we just pray that you would help them and guide them and give them the integrity and the wherewithal, the fortitude, Lord, the just all the things that are needed to make decisions, Lord, for the city. And pray that you would give them that, whether it's a big decision, small decision, Lord, easy, complicated, Lord, that it would all just be from you tonight. Lord, we ask for the protection over the city, and Lord, just as the world that we live in now can be crazy and chaotic, Lord, I just pray that you would help us, Lord, as a city to continue to keep our citizens safe, and Lord, just do all the things that need to be done for that, and just help in that, Lord. And I pray for the members of the community as well, Lord, all of us who live here, that work here, that you would help us not just to sit by and maybe even at times complain about things, but we would just get in and help and just be active and involved in this wonderful, amazing community. So I just pray for tonight, Lord, just be the night that you want it to be. We love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, guys.
With that, we'll move on to adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I'm going to move that we adopt the agenda as presented with maybe just a note, which is that item 2, which is an annexation for Pollard North, has requested a continuance to January 14th. I believe there's an issue with the sign posting, and I think the applicant needs to do a couple additional pieces of due diligence before they're before us. I don't know if anybody's here to testify on that, but council will at least take up that item when it's before us here shortly. With that, Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. The first item up is going to be a proclamation for National Mentoring Month. If I could have Hillary and the team join me at the podium. We're fancy here. So council tonight, tonight seems like a night of friends in a lot of ways based upon the way things are going with Stonehill and others. But as is mentioned, this is, well, you talk about the month in a second, but National Mentoring Month. And just for the record, I am a member of the Big Brothers Big Sisters Board of Idaho. And so it's great to have you here in this evening. And so I'll go and do the proclamation and turn it over to you for some comments. All right. Whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Idaho has been a dedicated advocate for the youth of Meridian for 45 years, providing one-to-one mentoring relationships that help young people overcome challenges and reach their full potential. And whereas the mentors, known as Bigs, give their time, energy, and heart to guide, support, and encourage the children they mentor, fostering self-confidence, academic success, and emotional well-being. And whereas through mentorship, Big Brothers Big Sisters has positively impacted the lives of countless youth in Meridian, helping to empower youth to overcome adversity, experience positive relationships, and become more resilient individuals. And whereas National Mentoring Month is an opportunity to recognize and celebrate the invaluable role that mentors play in shaping the future of our youth and to encourage more members of our community to become involved in mentoring through Big Brothers Big Sisters. And whereas the city of Meridian joins in this national effort to support Big Brothers Big Sisters of Idaho to encourage mentoring to help our communities thrive. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, hereby proclaim January 2025 as National Mentoring Month in the city of Meridian and call upon the citizens to join Big Brothers Big Sisters of Idaho in the pursuit of improving the lives of young people in our community through mentoring. Today, the 7th day of January 2025. So thank you for all that you all do to help keep this wonderful organization moving forward here in Idaho, not just the Treasure Valley, but as we look to continue to make that happen. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hillary for any comments you'd like.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Mayor Simpson and the Meridian City Council and the entire city of Meridian for supporting Big Brothers Big Sisters. As the proclamation mentioned, we have been serving Idaho for 45 years, and we're so excited to have the opportunity to set a foundation that will continue our organization for another 45 years and beyond. January is National Mentoring Month across the nation, and this is a time where we just celebrate all that mentoring does for our youth and even for the bigs and adults that are involved in our program. In the midst of a youth mental health crisis, mentorship helps support youth and it reduces depressive symptoms. It reduces the number of risky behaviors our youth are participating in. It improves self-confidence, and it's a really important thing, just not for our youth, but for our community as a whole. And so we're grateful for this opportunity, and we're grateful for this proclamation that will help us recruit more bigs, recruit more funds, and ensure that we're here to serve the community for many, many years to come. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you guys are free to stay as long as you want, but don't feel obligated. With that, we'll move on to Item 2, public hearing for Pollard North, H 2024-0037. Since it wasn't posted properly, we are not opening this. We're just going to continue. If that is correct. Okay.
So,
Councilman Cavanagh?
thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope if there's anyone that's here to testify on this, that they will be able to join us at the meeting when it's been properly noticed. Mr. Mayor, maybe just a quick question for staff. The note that I have is that you need some time to review. Do we need additional time than a week? Do you guys have everything you need? I guess I'm just trying to understand if this is a result of merely the sign placement error, or if you guys need additional time to be able to review things before next week.
Mayor, members of the council, I think it's adequate time.
Okay.
I think there's a couple things happening. One, the same applicant has another application in front of you next week. So they want to marry this one up with that particular project. And then also the notification, but we have received the revised plans and those are to the clerk and on the website. So Sonia can do a quick memo when she returns to the office and get that to you in a timely manner and should be able to hear it next week.
Mr. Mayor, maybe a question either for our clerk or legal. As we've sent postcards to neighbors on this particular one, noticing for tonight. Will they then re-notice as well for the 14th, given the short turnaround?
So, Mr. Members of the council, Councilmember Cavanagh, we wouldn't send new notices, but they would put the sign up, and by continuing it from this meeting where it was noticed, that is adequate from a noticing standpoint.
Okay, that's good enough for me then. So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh?
I move that we're gonna continue item 2, it's application H 2024-0037 to January 14th, 2025.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue item 2 to January 14th, 2025. Is there a discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the item is continued. With that, we'll move on to item 3, public hearing for Poldesi Reserve, H 2024-0055. We will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So next item on the agenda is the annexation for Poldesi Reserve. The applicant is requesting annexation of 3.31 acres of land for the construction of approximately 46,005 square feet of industrial space in the IL zoning district. The site is located at 3915 North 10 Mile Road. As shown on the screen, the current zoning is RUT in Ada County, and the flume designation is mixed use, non-residential. The current use of the property is residential with several existing buildings on the property. All the structures will be removed and the existing well and septic systems will be abandoned as required. The applicant has indicated the proposed use for the site are industrial buildings for industrial users. Any permitted and conditional uses will be allowed to occupy these spaces and will be determined with the building permit applications at a later date. The use of industrial buildings aligns with mixed-use non-residential future land use designation, which accommodates a range of commercial and industrial users. Access is proposed off of North 10 Mile Road through a single curb cut. The applicant has condensed the 3 access points to North 10 Mile Road into a single access point in the center of the property. Additionally, cross-access shall be stubbed to the property to the north and south, which the applicant has revised their plan and has complied with. The applicant has chosen to incorporate the water conserving design standards along the landscape buffer along 10 Mile, which reduces the buffer by 50%. The concept plan shows a 12.5-foot buffer meeting this requirement, and the landscaping will be analyzed with the submittal of the certificate of zoning compliance. Developer is proposing 3 industrial buildings with a mix of 1- and 2-story tenant spaces comprised of stucco, brick veneer, stucco wainscot, metal panels, metal panel roofing with moderate to large setbacks from the street and frontages exceeding the 20% windows. Staff and the commission are recommending approval and have received written testimony from Robbie Foldesi in opposition of the project, and I'll stand for questions at this time.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh?
thanks for presenting the application, and I guess my question is about that last piece that you touched on. I see the note. I read the letter that we got yesterday and the claim. Sounds like you've done that verification. I just think it'd be beneficial for me and maybe the council, when an application comes in for a request to annexation, what are the steps staff take to verify that the person making the request is actually the landowner?
Mr. Mayor, Council President Cavanagh, that's a great question. So as far as with that, we get the deed, the warranty deed for the property, and we do get an affidavit of legal interest if it is not the owner that's applying for the application. So I confirm that the owner is on the deed and has signed the affidavit saying that they're giving permission to this applicant to apply. I also do go to the Ada County Assessor's website to see who the primary and secondary owner are. In this case, this application had everything that checked out. After discussing with the applicant in the last 24 hours, after we received that email, I did receive documentation that confirms that we are able to move forward with this. And I think if you guys are curious to see that documentation, I do know that they have it with them tonight.
Mr. Mayor, a couple follow-ups.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Nick, I assume once you get all that clarification, do you then close the loop back with the public testimony? As the person who sent us that information, have we let them know that the efforts that you've taken to verify that this is a legal request that's before us tonight?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, Councilmember Cavanagh, that's correct. I did follow up with him this morning in an email stating that, he's welcome to come to the hearing and explain his side of the story, but we have received adequate documentation from that our legal department said was adequate as well to say we can move forward with this application and it will be heard tonight, yes.
Great. And Mr. Mayor, just one more to help close the loop on my curiosity for Mr. Neri. We've got two parties that maybe have a dispute about who does and doesn't own the land. Does that have any potential impact on a decision that the council were to make tonight? Meaning if the person who's contacted the city is correct, they do own the land, that is settled in court, and does that then undermine the decision that the council makes tonight if we make one at all?
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Cavanagh, I mean, that's great questions. Generally, no. The information that we have, again, shows this is the titled owner of the property. And so we're acting on basically the information that's provided by the county as to who the owner is. Certainly, if there's a dispute over ownership or the rights that might exist because of some other interest, certainly we're not aware of it. And so we can't act on anything other than that. If something were to come of it, I guess a court could address that and the circumstances that exist in that, and whether it would be de-annexing the property or something else. I couldn't tell you. But at least at this juncture, we don't have any reason not to move forward if the council wishes to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, thanks. I think this is the first time in my 11 years doing this that I've had this type of request. So part of this is process. It's also a little bit of curiosity about what would happen. So Nick, I appreciate you giving me some better education on that. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh. Council, any additional questions for staff? All right, is the applicant here? If you'd like to come forward, be recognized for 15 minutes.
Jeff Hatch with Hatch Design Architecture. Our address is 200 West 36th Street, Boise, Idaho, 83714. Good evening, Mayor Simison and council members. Thank you for your consideration of our annexation application this evening. Mr. Fodeshi, who owned this property, passed away relatively recently, but he was originally from Hungary and moved here and bought this property and was a fairly avid gardener and horticulturalist. He actually brought a native walnut tree from Hungary over here and planted on this property. And so part of what we were doing when we were thinking of a name for the property was trying to determine you have a unique remnant enclave parcel wrapped around mini storages essentially. So you have a reserve essentially. And so when we were looking at a name, looking at the owner's name and understanding what it means, which is a strong connection with land and nature, which is what he was kind of an avid fan of, but also it seemed to be very fitting because the name means a sense of belonging to a specific place, like a reserve. And so that's really where we came up with that name. Staff did a great job at going over our proposal as far as the annexation and the zoning, which we think is complementary to the area, but also, we have a lot of residential to the east of us and around that area density wise, and we got plenty of storage units. So having a range of IL businesses in this area to complement that was something that we felt was a need and was complimentary at our neighborhood meeting. As far as the land use map, we're complimentary to that as well. And just kind of recapping the site plan, a couple brief items that have changed since our planning and zoning meeting that we wanted to continue to refine for city council. You'll see item number 1, a proposed pedestrian pathway that goes from the public right of way all the way through the site. That was something that we didn't previously have. So we were able to adjust the site plan in order to accommodate more pedestrian access into and within the development. We also discussed with the neighbor to the south and north and ended up adjusting the location of our proposed cross access for future access to the south, shifting our trash enclosure to accommodate a more logical location for a frontage road or some connectivity in the future versus where we previously had it. And then lastly, you can kind of see, is this, it does. Right by the entry curb cut, there we go. We ended up incorporating some pavers into that area. So when you come off of 10 Mile, you'll have a little bit of sound and you'll have kind of a sense of entrance into this space, both from a safety standpoint, but also from an aesthetic standpoint. Again, taking the IL zone and elevating the space in this area. Here's a couple concept renderings from the entry coming into the development. And then looking at one of the buildings and the side, so a mix of stucco and metal and brick. And ultimately, we're wanting industrial uses in the ALL, but also trying to, celebrate some of the last pieces of land we have in Meridian off 10 Mile and make something that is a lasting legacy for the current owner as well as the previous owner, but also something that is going to be very helpful and useful for Meridian for years to come. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. Hatch, nice seeing you. Appreciate the application. Just more of a general question, help me understand, and because it's at a meeting with a good scout today, and we talked a lot about traffic on 10 Mile. That was one of his concerns. So talk to me a little bit about the traffic that this product is going to generate on a daily level. Is it 5 cars, 10 cars, 50 cars? What are you anticipating the kind of the traffic count is going to be for this particular project? Recognize it's largely small.
Yeah, so great question, Councilmember Cavanagh. The simple answer is we don't know because these are speculative buildings. And so we're saying anything in the IL that we can justify. So we'll build the shells. People will come in with their businesses and say, I want to be a general contractor and I want to have a little warehouse for my tools, but primarily it's an office. In that case, you have a relatively low use. And based on the parking, we're slightly overparked for the site for IL. But the traffic generated from that will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, both from the city standpoint as well as ACHD, to determine if a traffic impact study is required or if any additional improvements would need to be made. We are proposing the widest access that ACHD allows to accommodate for larger vehicular traffic, which typically wouldn't have a lot of vehicular traffic on a daily basis. So we're anticipating not high volumes of traffic like a restaurant or a drive-through. We're not proposing any drive-throughs. So,
Mr. Mayor, one additional, if I may.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. Hatch, talk to me about how, should you receive annexation, how quickly would you anticipate occupancy of these buildings?
oh, if we could do it, 10 days from now, I think that would be fantastic. So as quickly as realistically possible, we want to make sure that we balance the site and we're addressing ACHD's concerns through their review as well as the building department's review. But we plan on proceeding with construction documents immediately, submitting for our design review and CZC promptly, and proceeding with construction as soon as realistically possible.
Mr. Mayor, maybe just one more.
Ms. McGovern.
Mr. Arch, I think probably where I'm getting at is, anybody drives on 10 Mile, everyone feels that one car is one car too many on 10 Mile. Recognizing we're seeing the soon to be open Highway 16, I guess maybe the better question is, where does your project lie in the timeline of the Highway 16 expansion being opened?
Well, I'm not the general contractor for ITD for that project.
Sure.
So I have no control over their schedule, but realistically, CZC probably takes three-ish months, maybe a little quicker, maybe a little longer. So that would put us into April, May. We do permits shortly thereafter and get, permits midsummer. So construction takes, possibly a year. Just speculating, but I think sometime next spring/summer would be a realistic time for opening businesses. If we can go quicker, we'd love to.
Sure.
And we're excited to work with the city to try to make that happen.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hatch. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strader.
Hi, thanks for being here. Can you please talk a little bit more about the type of end users or tenants that you would expect in this site? This is a smaller industrial site, so I feel like your target market is a little bit, excuse me, is a little bit different. So I was just kind of curious. You kind of gave an example of a general contractor. I thought that was interesting. What other types of users generally would you expect to see here?
Well, I mean, as you see from the elevations, it's an elevated use, but the IL has a range of different uses. So you may get other subcontractors or approved uses in that IL zone that are justified both from a traffic and use standpoint. So we anticipate there may be some that have conditional uses and others that are approved outright. And we'll just kind of take those on a case-by-case basis.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strader.
Got it. Yep. I mean, you're not obligated to tell us your business plan, but it was more of a curiosity. I do have to say it is, from an aesthetic perspective, it is one of the nicer looking industrial developments in terms of the renderings that we've seen. And I would like to compliment you on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Stater. I'm the architect, so that is my business. The occupying of the buildings, we're trying to specify the use and be very specific about maintaining the intent of the IL.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Clerk, do we have anybody sign up on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody present or in the room or online who would like to provide testimony on this item? And if you're online, you can use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one online raising their hand and no one coming forward, would the applicant like to make any final comments at this time?
Hi, my name is Jared Sherburne, and I'm the developer for the project. My address is 1456 East Iron Eagle Drive in Eagle. Mayor Simison and City Council members, thank you for your time this evening. First of all, I'm very honored and excited about this project, what we've worked on designing, what we're bringing to the community. And I just wanted to thank the city. The city of Meridian has been fantastic to work with, and excited about bringing this development. To kind of answer your question, we're going to bring the end user would likely be whatever the market gives us is the real answer. That's why it's hard to tell who the end user will really be. Hope that answers that question. Anyway, just wanted to thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Council, any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Gavner.
Anybody else has any other questions? I'm going to move that we close the public hearing on item number 3.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Gavner.
Talk oftentimes how hard infill is, and I know this is kind of quasi infill, but I'm going to give the applicant credit. It is infill and probably the record for the fastest hearing for an infill project. I think this is a pretty cut and dry request. I agree with Councilmember Strader. The renderings are great. It's going to be a nice addition to 10 Mile. I'm satisfied with the timeline that it will have minimal, if any, impact on 10 Mile, given the Highway 16 expansion. So that, Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve item 3, Odessa Reserve, application H-2024-0055, include all staff and applicant testimony.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item H 2024-0055. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Good luck and thank you. Next item up, item 4 is public hearing for H 2024-0048. We will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, next item on the agenda is the annexation for 330 North Linder Road. The applicant is requesting annexation of 1 acre of land for the proposed use of vehicle sales or rental and service. The site is located at 330 North Linder Road, and as shown on the screen, the current zoning is R1 in Ada County, and the flume designation is general industrial. The subject property is part of an enclave area surrounded by city annex property. Annexation of this property will provide more efficient provisions of city services. Industrial uses exist to the west across North Linder and to the south and east. Single-family residence in Ada County is present to the north. However, they do run a business out of that residence in Ada County. This property is designated as general industrial on the flume designation. The use of vehicle sales or rental and service is consistent with the comprehensive plan and is listed as a permitted use in the IL designation. The existing residence is proposed to remain as the main office for the vehicle sales business. The building shall abandon well and septic and connect to city services at the time of annexation in accord with the UDC. Additionally, the current structure proposed to remain will be non-conforming to the 35-foot street setback required if approved in IL zoning. Any future development will require compliance with this 35-foot setback. The applicant is requesting council waiver to reduce the 25-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the residence to the north. They have received a written document from the property owners from the north in support of this reduction from 25 to 5 feet. The applicant is proposing water-wise landscaping, which allows you to reduce 50% in street section buffers. So a 12.5-foot wide street buffer along Linder shall be constructed. One full driveway access exists to this site via Linder Road. However, this is proposed to be eliminated and the applicant will share access with the property to the south through a cross-access agreement. There's the existing site on Linder Road. And staff is recommending 2 changes to the DA provisions in the staff report. After the Planning and Zoning Commission, we worked with the applicant to revise some concerns they had with some of our provisions. And the first one is really, so ITD requires 5 vehicle display areas for a retail car sale. So we are proposing to change that from 3 to 5 essentially, so they can be in compliance and get their retail car sales license through ITD. And additionally, the applicant was not in favor of the cross access being required to the property to the north. Staff is still going to require the access, but we're going to require an easement at this time instead of a stub. And when the property does redevelop as anything other than a vehicle sales or rental and service use, that's when we will require the stub to actually be in place. That's just something for you guys to view and see if you want to adopt those changes. It's not necessarily, it's just proposed change that staff worked with the applicant on to find a compromise. And really, staff and commission are recommending approval and have not received any written testimony on this project, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strader.
It's very unusual for us not to require a stub. Cross-access is really important. It's really something hard to achieve if we do not get it up front. I'm just curious, can you provide a little more context why you felt like in this instance a compromise was warranted?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader. Yeah, so as far as with that, because of the use, it's a vehicle rental use. And really, he was concerned with security to his site, as far as not having people driving through his car lot. Is really his main concern. If that property to the north were to redevelop, they would essentially be able to access that stub and drive through it at any time. And his main concern was the safety of his cars and his lot and the security of that. In talking with Bill and some other people here in the planning department, we have in the past done similar circumstances where, for certain uses, we will allow there to be an easement instead of a stub at this time. And then when the property does redevelop is when we will require that stub. So with the concerns over his safety or the safety of his product and the use that he is proposing, we felt that it was appropriate not to have another use driving through the middle of a rental lot, essentially.
Mr. Mayor, one follow-up.
Councilman Schrader.
So, yeah, I'm tracking with where you're going there. But how do we track internally a DA provision like this to ensure that if there was redevelopment, that this would be flagged for us? We have sometimes enforcement issues with conditions in our development agreements. So I just want to understand, just from a practical, like nuts and bolts perspective, how will you all track when that occurs?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader. So as far as with that, that's a great question. As far as it will be in the development agreement, and whenever a property does redevelop, we do look at those development agreements to ensure that any existing provisions such as this would be met. You are correct that sometimes those aren't always caught, or they do sometimes lead to errors. That is true. And maybe Bill can speak to a better way of us tracking it, but
There's always a better way. So Mayor, members of the council, what we've been doing lately and trying to do is leverage our GIS mapping a little bit better. So whenever we get a recorded cross-access agreement, we actually put a crosshatch on that particular property so that when something comes up next to it in the future, we can look at that, and we call it a tagged layers, a tagged property layer that we have in our GIS, and that way we can see that it's highlighted. We can click on that and say, oh, what is this? It will reference the cross-access agreement, and then we can research that and dig into that development agreement and see what occurred at the time and why that driveway was either constructed or not constructed. But certainly, as Nick pointed out this evening, it is a recommended change. So again, if council doesn't feel comfortable with that, you certainly within your purview to require it to be constructed at this time.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
I think that's fantastic that you're leveraging technology in that way. That just seems like a really practical, really common sense way of going about it. So thank you.
Council, additional questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
not a question, but I just want to make a note. I do want to recuse myself from the vote because I have a personal relationship with the applicant.
Thank you very much. All right, then would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, staff. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Matt Wilkie. I'm here to represent Nick Rinker, Rinker Properties LLC. I'm out of Middleton, Idaho, PO Box 7, and with White Barn Ventures is my company. So thank you for your time here tonight. Staff really nailed this on the head. That we agree with all the changes and the staff report. Like I said, we located this property. It is R1 currently, so we're asking to annex and rezone this in for light industrial for his car lot. He's just a destination business. Mostly he's staging rental cars from this location, so there's not a lot of traffic. It's just when he gets a call for a rental, they'll deliver it to the Boise airport. And he has some use to maintain some vehicles from time to time on the site and to keep his inventory maintained. And then other than that, the cross-access easement, we agree with staff there that they listen to our clients' concerns there with security, and it is quite a bit of a concern. He does have some pretty nice vehicles from time to time. He rents out there. They're kind of specialty use. So in the future, if it did develop out, he understands that if there was a different use, there would most likely need to be that cross-access put in place. And he's happy to record that easement there in the meantime.
Thank you. Council questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strader.
Thank you. I'm curious, is your client willing to help, put funds aside for the construction of the cross access at a later time? And kind of where I'm going with it is, for the part that's on this property, there's just the easement, but there's no funding behind the actual, cross access. And so that would put the burden of the entirety of the cross access, like constructing it, onto the adjacent property owner. So I just want to understand how you're thinking about that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader. This site's interesting. So on the south side, we have cross access already. We're using the neighbor's access for shared access because he's on a principal arterial there on Linder. The north side, it gains quite a bit of elevation there. The neighbor actually has concrete wall there and abutting the property. So it's as far as the expense side goes, I think the northern neighbor would incur more expense to develop their property than my client would on the south side. I think just allowing that cross access for his property to develop in the future is going to be a huge improvement for future access, but I don't see that he really has a lot of site prep to do to improve that access in the future.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Strader.
But I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding, your client is not intending to construct the stub street.
Correct.
So how much would the stub street be is what I'm trying to figure out on your side, on your own property.
Understood. Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader, at this point, it's kind of unknown. His property is going to be mostly just a parking lot where most likely there would be a cross access put in. So I don't think it would be much different than they have currently planned for the site. I don't really know what the plan in the future would hold there. Whether or not the neighbor to the north is going to be required to come through this property prior to this property developing out to another use in the future, long-term planning. But at this point, it's just pretty much parking lot and an office building up front for the rental business.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strader.
sorry, just to get maybe more specific. So I understand. So there's a parking lot, and what I'm trying to figure out is where the cross access would go, what would be involved there. So I guess what I'm wondering is why you wouldn't just go ahead and construct the stub street, knowing there really shouldn't be an issue because the neighbor to the north has that wall that's not redeveloping yet. So it's not like someone would be accessing the site. And I'm just, where I'm going with it is if it's not a huge burden in terms of the cost, I'm wondering why we wouldn't just have you construct the stub street now, knowing it wouldn't be functional, as opposed to later, if the property to the north redevelops, it's going to be extremely difficult to get your client to make the improvements on their own property if it's in a landscape buffer or something else. So that's the piece I was trying to figure out.
Understood, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader. I don't think it's going to be that difficult. Right now, I think they would have to leave a hole in the fence unless you would be allowed to leave that up. And it probably wouldn't be much different than the easement he has in place because there's only a 5-foot landscape buffer required there now. So I don't think there's going to be a big infrastructure project in the future to put a stub there. Right now, the property width is fairly narrow as it is. So there's not really going to be a stub street per se. It might just be like a spot in the fence.
Yeah.
So I don't really
Okay.
think it really has room to put a stub street in as the site plan shows right now. Maybe just a line on the fence, maybe where it would go.
Okay. I'll mull that over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
appreciate kind of the application. I've got some similar questions really about the cross-access agreement. Are you planning to have like a barrier or a gate to prevent people from accessing this site when it's not being operated? I mean, is that the intention? Is that?
At this point, it would be ideal to have a gate there. Whether or not he's going to be allowed to do that on the southern access, I don't think he was supposed to be here. He just landed in Boise, but he's a day late. He got stuck in the airport. So he's on his way, but he's late. But I don't think that there was any plans for a gate there. It would be ideal if he could for security. But at this point, I think the access is going to be through the southern neighbor there on the Linder.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I think that's my point. You've got a cross-access agreement to the south that you're using to access, and that one's okay, right? Because that lets you get access, but now you're saying, hey, the neighbor to the north, they shouldn't be afforded the same opportunity that you've got. And that, I guess that's the part that I'm struggling to wrap my head around. And I hear security, but to that point, if let's hope nobody's nefarious. We've got the best police department in the country. They're proactive with their policing. But if somebody's wanted to be nefarious, they're going to access that site to do something terrible off of Linder. They're not going to access it through a cross-access agreement. So that's the part that I'm struggling with. To my good colleague's point, it's very rare that these cross-access agreements come in much after the fact. Like, this is kind of the bite of the apple. And so I'm being upfront, I'm really struggling to find a basis to grant the request that's coming from you and staff. I think the original request within the staff report is, at least for me right now, where I'm most comfortable. I'm just trying to understand what the compelling reason is. And I just gotta be honest, the safety element is not necessarily resonating with me because you rely on a cross access to the south to be able to get into your property.
Agreed. Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh, I hear your concerns and I understand, but one extra access that's opened up before the northern site develops is just another access point for a security problem. Where on the south side, he's got an ability to have cameras and that kind of thing and protect his access a little bit better. And sharing it with the neighbor, it's not necessarily a cross-through access at that point. They have to come in and come back out that access. So their plan for the site was when that northern site does develop, then they have that access easement in place. And so it does grant cross access in the future. At this point, it's kind of not necessary for his site or the northern neighbor.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Just some perspective, that's often the case, right, with a cross-access agreement. The neighbor to the south, your property, there wasn't any development there. There was no purpose for that south cross-access at the time, right? That's why we put them in, is so you get that connectivity as growth continues to move in a northerly or southerly portion. So I appreciate your feedback. Again, what's nice, there's 5 of us that are here, or 4 of us, and I want to be upfront as kind of where my hesitation is on this piece. I'm supportive of the application, just not supportive of that particular piece.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
just a clarification. And did you say that the neighbor to the north has a wall between that property and your property?
Correct. Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Whitlock, there is it's like the home is built up at a higher elevation. So there's actually a retaining wall on the northern portion of our applicant's property. And then there's also, it's already fenced, but he's got 6-foot fencing already in place around the site. But the topography changed from his property setting lower to the property to the north. There's a pretty substantial change in elevation where they built up the home site on the northern property. So I think in order to make an actual access through there, it may be difficult or more difficult to do so without cutting down the neighbor's property or adding something to it to make that flow. But we weren't really planning on engineering that in at this point with an easement in place. But,
Thank you. That helps.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
One additional question for you on that wall. We've got the site photo that's before us. I assume it looks like it would be about maybe 2 or 3 foot kind of concrete piece.
correct.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, or Mr. Clerk, we have anybody else sign up on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we did. I don't know. We have Jared Sherburne. I believe he was with the last application, and then Jacob Bottles.
Are either of them, those two individuals wishing to testify at this time? I don't see anyone coming forward, so that really just leaves you as the applicant to close with additional questions from council. So I don't know if there's any final comments you want to make, if there's more questions council has, any other direction that people would like to pursue.
Thank you for your
Okay.
time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, looks like the applicant's got maybe a question or comment.
Yes.
Public hearing's still open. I'm open to hearing from.
Okay.
Nick, he said he is going to have a gate. So I don't know if that changes things.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strader.
just to follow up on that, sorry, was that a gate to the south?
Correct, on the south
Um,
side. It is planned to be gated still.
Okay, and then I have a question then for staff, which is that acceptable under our code? Because it's a cross access.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Strader, correct. So as far as with this, no, it is not. As far as having a gate there, that is not in the conversations that I had with him, was the intent to do that. From my understanding, if you can see my cursor on the screen, he was planning on putting a gate further back on the site, which would be something that would be allowed if there was still access through the site. But with a cross access agreement, correct, there does need to be access that's reciprocated. So he can't just wall himself off from the southern boundary. That is correct. And I believe our fire department would not allow for that as well, if I remember correctly.
So kind of playing off of that a little bit, because, cross access now, cross access in the future, construct it and it's kind of like this road or this sidewalk to be extended into the future mentality. If you cross access is really permitted, but if you can't drive through because there's a fence to the north, it doesn't really exist. So I guess that's where I'm personally, I mean, to me, the bigger issue is the elevation change, if there's any that requires the site to actually be properly developed, I guess so I guess at the end of the day, my question is, are we developing this site or are we not developing this site? Why are we here for the annexation? If we're really not going to develop the site, what is the value of the annexation, even to the property owner? What are we here for? We're just going to park some cars on. Is that not allowed in the county? I'm really trying to get to the understanding of the application purpose.
Mr. Mayor.
Staff.
Yep, Mr.
applicant,
Mayor, council. Yes, he needs to annex in and rezone the industrial for his dealership license. So he needs to have a site, and that's the reasoning for annexing in this property. We didn't really think it was going to be an issue with the cross-access easement until the northern site developed. And to that point, like you say, with the elevation changes, we'd have to do something with the northern neighboring property, I think, to make everything flow. And until they're ready to develop, we really don't know where to even put the cross access. May have to meander, I don't know, maybe they'll remove that home in the future. I'm just not sure what the plan would be on the northern site there. Or his site's pretty easy to develop. It's like you say, it's a lot with parking spaces, and then maybe in the future a maintenance building that he need to get a permit for, but and in his office. So it doesn't really need a lot of structural changes to develop the site. But it would be useful. He absolutely needs to be able to annex in to have his dealership license approved.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, In addition to that, he actually did have his well fail on the site as well. So he is needing to hook up to city services. He has been working with Kyle Raddick in Public Works to be proactive in that. He has hit a little bit of a roadblock, not from our end, but from ACHD, and the fact that Linder right now is a no cut. So he is having a little bit of a difficulty with that, but he is working with ACHD actively on being able to access the water that's in Linder Road.
So maybe take this to the next step. Annexation's allowed, no cross access is required. Next week, you get an application on the property to the north. Are they prohibited from developing in the future because cross access isn't granted down, or cross access won't occur until this property decides that they want to? Just trying to follow the dominoes as to what are we creating potentially by not requiring proper development? And I'm going to use the word proper because that's really what it is in this case. I understand the hardship, but it's, you know.
Mayor, Council, I'll try to elaborate on that a little bit and give you some context. So I think all of you are aware, cross access is required per our code, but it also can be waived by council. So it's not a thou shalt do that. It gives you the ability to take that under consideration and determine if it makes sense, if it's proper development. In this particular case, if we don't get cross access to that property to the north, we're either going to rely on the other property to the north of it to provide cross access, or council and ACHD will have to grant that gentleman access to an arterial for his property. That's kind of the risk that we're dealing with. The difficulty that you have with this particular site is, one is typically a car dealership is not conducive to cross access because of the inventory. Certainly that gentleman could put a gate around his inventory where the cars are parked and still leave the drive aisle open. The other challenge to this site is the current and we've been dealing with the applicant, is where the property owner in the south put the cross access driveway, it lines up right where the house is. And so if that house wasn't to remain, you could just go straight up and parallel the road and have a straight shot in. It would probably work better for all intents and purposes but keeping the existing home is really the challenge here. That's kind of that infill challenge that we're faced with when you try to keep existing conditions and try to fit our code into that box. It gets to be challenging at some point, but you are correct. If there is a driveway built, it's basically a driveway to nowhere until we understand what the property owner to the north does. And I've worked on cross-access driveways. I don't know if you're familiar with the one on Fairview, but there's a vet clinic and some fourplexes. So you know where the new AAA went in? There was a car dealership there. I had them put in that cross access to the vet, and guess what? It's 3 feet taller than the vet site and never got extended. And so the vet currently uses their access to Fairview Avenue, because that was one of those kind sites where we're like, build it now, but we didn't take it. The rest of, if that existing property didn't match up, they couldn't just tear out his driveway or his parking lot and then build their driveway to match up. It does, to your point, Councilwoman Schrader, it adds expense to the project, and we just don't know that. So that's why Nick and we've done this in the past where we've had a lot of those storage facilities that you see along 10 Mile Road. That's what we did. We're like, as long as you're storage, we're not going to require cross access, but we still need an easement just in case at some point in the future, properties will get too expensive to develop, and there will be a lot more redevelopment happening in the city rather than outward growth. And so people will have to start redeveloping some of these properties. And so we don't want to be so narrow-sighted not to require it. And that's why we kind of went to our bag of tricks that we've used in other projects and said, if you're a car dealership, you can build a cross-access, but you don't have to utilize it until such time as it becomes an office or something else in the future. It may be a contractor's yard, and then maybe they don't want it either. So, but we at least get another bite at the apple. It's in the DA. We can come back and have that conversation with you in the future too and say, does cross access make sense? And I think that's what the point of the conversation is tonight, is cross access makes sense with what's currently developed on the south and the unknown on the north, with the addition of the retaining wall and the grade change. How does that all work in tandem with one another? We don't know that tonight. Like you said, all we're here to talk about is annexation and developing a car lot on this one site. And that's what makes it difficult when you have these 1 acre pieces that we're taking down one piece at a time along Linder Road and trying to make sure that it all integrates as one development. It's challenging.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
So just cutting to the chase, it looks like you have at least at a minimum, at least 2 members of the city council that have concerns about the cross access. So, and I know you wanted your client to be in this meeting, they're not here. Are you looking for a decision tonight, like an up or down vote on it? Are you looking, because if it's denied, then I believe that will potentially cause some issues in terms of delays and so forth. Or would you like to rethink all of this? I guess I'm just like looking for feedback on how you want to move forward.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Strader, this, we were hoping for an approval tonight, but I don't know if what Bill said is okay with you. If you would, if that swayed the 2 council members, it may be leaning towards needing the access put in place currently, or if it would be okay to keep that as an easement now until we know what the northern site develops as. And like Bill said, there is homes in the way. You can't just cross access through because he's going to have his office there. It's not moving. And then the building to the north, or the home that's currently to the north, is also about in the same line. So where would they put their cross access currently? And in the future, when these sites develop to a different use, possibly, maybe that's the time you do the cross access for or maybe a restaurant. I don't know what you'd come in there for, but right now, I think that lot as it sits, it would be great if we could keep that as an easement. Be fantastic.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, just to dialogue on that a little bit, part of my concern is, again, by approaching it this way, I think what we're setting ourselves up for is a situation where when the other property develops, I think it will make it so that the economic burden of figuring out the construction of the cross access will fall onto that property owner exclusively. And I don't see either money put into like an account for future construction costs or something that would make me feel comfortable that that will be realized. It's just, I think Council President Kavner hit it on the head. This is our only bite at the apple to get the cross access. And we've seen many situations where the cross access did not occur. And then that creates a lot of challenges within the city because of the lack of connectivity. We don't know what will be there. So that's what I'm struggling with. I would rather have you build the substreet, although it's not really a street, to your point. It's maybe 5 feet of landscaping that you need to pave or whatever, but I'd rather have that occur and feel confident that that won't be an issue on your property. That's just where I'm coming from. I'd love to hear from everybody else, but I just unfortunately don't feel like this compromise quite gets me there in terms of feeling confident that we've set the city up long-term, not just for the next 10 years, but for the next 50 years.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
and just to help clarify this in my mind, I think I heard you say that they have poured a parking lot to the north. Is that correct? Is it paved or concrete, or have they made improvements to the north?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Whitlock, no, there's no parking lot to the north. It's just a residential home site. And the concrete is actually a retaining wall. It's because our home's built higher, so it's keeping the dirt from falling basically onto the southern neighbor where our applicant's property would be. It's keeping their property up to shape, but there's no parking lot that I'm aware of on that north side. I think it's just a residential property still.
Residential.
Not knowing where, I'll just speak from my standpoint. If these two are going the way that they may imply that they may, I need more clarification if I'm being asked to vote tonight. I need a site plan for all 3 properties that shows cross access for future, 2 different options. They all develop it together at some point in time as one property, and here's what it would be. And absent that, what would this look like? Because 3 entrances onto Linder in this location is unacceptable. And that's what we got to work towards. I'm not saying it has to be, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be constructed now, but it needs to be on a site plan established for when this were to ever develop, or short of that, first in gets first right to make the decisions, build it, and it exists. You've done your part. The next people will have to match it on their property, and often first people in get that opportunity. So one or the other, either work with the neighbor and come up with a plan, in my opinion, or agree to do it and the neighbor can match it when it's their turn in that context. But I need something along those lines rather than just saying where it's just allow the annexation without really any improvements to the property. But I understand why, and I want to be supportive, but I'm not there yet if I'm asked to be involved in the vote tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, council members, I believe my applicant would absolutely love to build it now and get it on the spot, or at least put it in place. Do we, Bill, do you know where you'd want to put something like that? Is that something that the city is going to require in a location, or Nick?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, so as far as with that, it's two different locations that we can have a discussion on at the certificate of zoning compliance. Really, the first one is going to be between the existing residence now and the future maintenance shop that you're proposing, or further back on the site between the car lot and the maintenance. I think ideally, and I don't know the full dimension of how wide this is right here, if it does meet the dimensional standards, and obviously that maintenance shop is not there. If it does meet the dimensional standards for a driveway, I think that is the preferred location. I don't know what your client's preferred location is, but those would be the two that one of the two we would require. And I think the one closer to Linder would be preferred from the city's perspective.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
just a suggestion, would it be helpful to get a continuance this evening so you could confer with your client and work with city staff on where the cross access would be located? I'm kind of wondering if maybe just taking a break and kind of coming back might make more sense.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader, that may be a great idea. I don't think we're really far apart here at all. I think if my applicant was here, he would be able to make the call. I don't really want to get him pinned in on one side or the other, and I'll give him time to work with the city. The city's been amazing. The staff's incredible. You guys are fantastic to work with, so I think that's a fantastic idea.
And the only thing I'll add, at least from my perspective, it doesn't need to be functional crowd. It can have a sign that says this will be extended in the future.
Yeah.
So whether that's when your property develops or the next neighbor property develops, we're not looking to force something, but we're looking to make sure something happens, at least from my perspective. So I'll stop there. Councilwoman Schrader.
Mr. Mayor, I was just curious for feedback on when you'd like to come back in a couple weeks, or if you have, and we need to also check with our clerk too and see what our public hearing schedule is sort of looking like, but.
Yeah, I think they could, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader, I think they can get that figured out pretty quick. I don't think it's a big pull here.
2 weeks.
Mr. Mayor and council members, would it be something that we could put on the development agreement now that, I'm just thinking maybe if that was a problem for timing and things with the city and there would be a cross-access agreement put in place and a cross-access before the agreements, before the annexations of final? Can that just be put in the development agreement now as part of the agreement, or do you have to have a plan, site plan change?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I feel like with the feedback you've received, I think having the site plan revised would be important just to sort of demonstrate what this is going to look like. And usually that becomes kind of an exhibit to all the decision making. And we find that to be extremely helpful. So like 10 years from now, when Nick's like, what did we do with that hashtag? And he can go and see exactly. But I would suggest, it sounds like the 21st, which is 2 weeks from now, is pretty clear. We have a few things on our agenda, but would that work okay for you all to come back?
Yes, that'd be fine. And Nick just texted me, he says if he doesn't have a choice between an easement or not, then yes, he'd do the cross access, but
Yeah.
sounds to me like we're all on the same page here, that in a couple weeks we could button it up.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Then I would move that we keep the public hearing open and continue this application to January 21st.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing to January 21st. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Let's continue to the 21st.
Thank you very much.
All right,
We'll
thank
see you then.
Council, anything under future meeting topics or motion to adjourn?
Mayor,
Councilman Cameron.
adjourn the meeting.
Motion adjourned. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.